FBI interviews acquaintance of man charged in Manhattan attack. Since the FBI this week released a red-bannered poster seeking information about a second Uzbek man in connection with the terrorist attack in Lower Manhattan, mystery has swirled around the man and why investigators were looking for him. On Friday, 2 days after investigators found the man, Madzakir Kadyrov, in New Jersey, FBI agents interviewed him for 4 hours about his relationship with Sayfullo Saipov, who is charged with killing 8 people in the attack, said a person with knowledge of the interview. Agents told Mr. Kadyrov that he was being treated as a witness in the case, said the person, who shared the information on the condition of anonymity. And Mr. Kadyrov described Mr. Saipov to agents as a pretend Muslim, the person said. Mr. Kadyrov's face was splashed across television screens and news websites immediately after the FBI announced Wednesday it was trying to learn more about him. Less than 90 minutes later, the FBI said it had found him. Since then, Mr. Kadyrov, 32, has publicly tried to distance himself from Mr. Saipov, 29, releasing a statement that said in part, "We as Muslims completely reject this kind of actions." Much of their relationship remains unclear, as does the reason the FBI was so eager to find Mr. Kadyrov after the attack. The FBI declined to comment on the interview with Mr. Kadyrov. Some details about the pair's friendship and Mr. Kadyrov's account to the FBI emerged on Friday. He spells his first name Madzakir and not Madzwar, as the authorities initially rendered it. The pair met in Florida, where Mr. Kadyrov moved after arriving in the United States in 2014. The person with knowledge of the interview said they did not know each other well at the time. Neighbors in the apartment complex, where Mr. Kadyrov lived with his family in Tampa, said they often saw Mr. Kadyrov and Mr. Saipov together there and at a nearby mosque. They became closer after both moved to New Jersey, the person said. They drove for Uber, though Mr. Kadyrov also worked odd jobs as a sales manager at a flooring company and for a car company. Mr. Kadyrov noticed Mr. Saipov growing more and more short-tempered and agitated, the person said, even fighting with customers and people on the road. Mr. Kadyrov gave his friend books on Islam and urged him to listen to the teachings of Uzbek religious leaders. But Mr. Saipov didn't seem interested, the person said, and asked questions that Mr. Kadyrov felt showed an ignorance of Islam. Rather, Mr. Saipov seemed more committed to the most conservative outward observances of the religion. He wore his beard long and wild, in a style rare among Uzbeks. And neighbors and friends said Mr. Saipov's wife wore a niqab as part of a full-body covering that left only her eyes exposed. In Uzbekistan, such conservative clothing is nearly unheard of. In recent months, Mr. Saipov began talking about the possibility of moving back to Uzbekistan, the person said. Money was tight, Mr. Saipov told People, and the long-haul trucking business that had supported him since he arrived in the United States in 2010 was no longer as lucrative. He sold his truck and began taking odd jobs, as well as driving for Uber. Mr. Saipov's plan, the person said, was to wait until his wife obtained American citizenship and then move back to Uzbekistan, where they are both from. Why he veered so violently from that plan is still unclear. Like Mr. Saipov, Mr. Kadyrov received a green card through the diversity visa program. Mr. Kadyrov, who speaks Uzbek, Arabic, Russian, and English, took classes in Islamic studies in the Quran at Al-Azhar University in Cairo from 2005 to 2012, the person said. His father is a diplomat and his mother is a doctor. More recently, he had been taking continuing education classes in New Jersey. In a separate development on Friday, John J. Miller, the New York Police Department's Deputy Commissioner for Intelligence and Counterterrorism, said at a news conference that investigators were combing Mr. Saipov's phone records and internet contacts. He said investigators had interviewed witnesses who said they had seen Mr. Saipov in the weeks before the attack with a rental truck like the one used in the attack. Mr. Miller said investigators had also canvassed for video to try to corroborate those accounts. as people gathered on Friday for prayers at a mosque near where Mr. Sapod lived in Paterson, New Jersey. Some in the Muslim community there were preparing for a steep escalation in threats since the attack. The Islamic Center of Passaic County said it had received 8 threatening phone calls on Wednesday and Thursday. Officials there notified the Paterson Police Department, which told the center it was investigating the threats. "We haven't seen anything of this magnitude," said a woman who worked for several years at the center and